Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Neo4j Twitch channel. My name is Adam. So for anybody who is new to this channel, each Tuesday around this time, I spend about an hour or so working through some examples of how you can build web applications with Neo4j and TypeScript. So in the first couple of weeks, I started working through an example project for a fictional client called Neoflix, an example sort of streaming service. And I worked through how you could build an application on top of Neo4j using nest.js. So I took the learnings and the things I built inside that project, and then added it to this nest Neo4j package. So basically, the nest Neo4j package is a way for you to basically just reduce the amount of boilerplate before as you get started with Neo4j. So the package itself you can install via npm, so npm install or yarn add, and then nest-neo4j. And then the idea is you can register the module, so you can either register the Neo4j module using hard-coded details, or you can use things like the config service to generate a Neo4j config item. And then once you have registered that module, you can inject it into a controller or another service, and then use the Neo4j service class to then either read or write to the database. So in the few weeks after that, I spent some time building and working through an application on the Realworld example. So the Realworld example is a project built by Thinkster. And it's basically the mother of all demo apps, but it's basically there are sets of front ends and back ends that you can pair together in order to build an application. So I built a back end similar to, for example, the Node or Go examples, to work with any of the front ends. So I spent some weeks working through that, working through the code, building out some modules, controllers, and updating the data in Neo4j. So also inside this this module, we've got a few things to make your life easier when you're working with Neo4j. So for example, there's an error filter. And basically what this does is it listens for Neo4j errors, so any error that's thrown from the driver. It'll default to a status code of 500, but for example, if we find a constraint error, so if we have a unique constraint and we try and add something that already exists, then we can take that error, we can transform it into a 400 baud request, and then that works in line with the validation pipe that comes with Nest. There are a couple of interceptors that work with Nest as well. So, for example, there's a transaction interceptor. So what this will allow you to do is run multiple read and write queries inside the same transaction. So when a request comes in, it gets intercepted by this interceptor, which then creates a new transaction inside Neo4j and then binds that to a request. So then you can use that to run queries against the Neo4j database, and then at the end of the end of that request, the transaction will commit, saving everything at once. Or if there are any errors inside the application at any point, then it will roll back the transaction. And yeah, so all of the code that I'm writing throughout these live streams is available on GitHub in various different places. So it's the Nest Neo4j repository under my personal account. The Twitch project is there as well if you're interested in setting up an application with Nest. And under Neo4j examples, we've got this nest.js Realworld example. If you're interested in other implementations of the the Realworld example. You can search for Realworld, and then there's a node.js version as well, which works with Express. Cool. And all of the things that I'm doing, I'm writing up blog posts and I'm making them available on the Neo4j developer blog. So if you go to medium.com/Neo4j, then there's a whole list there. So for example, in the last week, I've been working through creating a knowledge graph with Neo4j and Slack data, so data that you export from Slack. So that one's up there as well. And if you search through, you should be able to see some more written by me. For example, building a modern web application with Neo4j and Nest, and that's essentially the article that accompanied the first few blog posts. All the videos as well, they're up on the Neo4j Twitch channel, and they're also up on YouTube. So if there's anything you've missed, if there's anything you have any questions on, you can go and check there. There's a playlist on YouTube, which should be there. Yeah. Anyway, there's a playlist on the Neo4j YouTube channel called "Building Web Applications with Neo4j and TypeScript." So all of the information is there. There's a few live streams there that I've done, and as well some edited versions of the content as well. But one of the things I haven't covered so far in these streams, one of the things that I would like to do is to implement some better testing into the applications that I built. So far, if you've been following along, I've been writing some end-to-end tests, and that basically tests the whole stack from top to bottom. So for a user journey from start to end, we test absolutely everything. But that's great for our higher overview of the testing. We may be interested in like smaller edge cases, and for that we need to do unit testing. So, for example, with the unit tests, what we can do is we can take a service, we can mock some of the dependencies that we inject into those classes, and then use those mocked instances to create or to basically to use those classes to return specific values to see how the service reacts. So, for example, we may want to test what happens if a certain node is sent. One thing that unit tests allow us to do is to check that basically the Neo4j interactions are working correctly. But sorry, bear with me a sec. So it allows us to basically check that the interactions with Neo4j are working correctly, and also we can do that without actually touching the database. So what we can do is we can mock the Neo4j service or the responses from the Neo4j driver, and then ensure that that is treated correctly by the application itself. So that's what I'm going to do today. So to do that, I'm going to use Jest. So Jest comes packaged with nest.js, and you may have noticed if you've been watching along so far that when we run any of the nest create commands or nest generate commands, we get these spec files here, and these are essentially the files that get generated. And there's also in the package.json, there's some tests there that auto-generated. So basically, if we run npm run test, it runs Jest, uses some local config there to basically look through all of the files which are ending in .spec.ts, and then run those tests from start to finish. So if I run npm run test, then there should be some tests in there, and they should all fail. which is fine. We haven't implemented anything at the moment. So some problems there. We're not going to go through and fix them at the moment. What I'll do for now is I'll concentrate on one of the specs, and then we can go from there. So today I'm going to look at the article service and see if I can spec that out, and then make sure that everything runs. So what I can do is I can run npm run test, but there's also a watch test as well. So if I run npm run test watch, then basically it will run the test and then it will watch for changes. So I can do like a TDD style approach. So every time I change a test, it will rerun the test for me. So I can see instantly if things are passing or if they're failing, which is really useful. Cool. And because I'm only interested in one file at the moment, so I can either specify the test that I would like to run. I can run all of the tests. I can run only the tests that have failed, or I can filter by file name. So if I do p, and then I want to run the article tests, so I should be able to do article. So it's still running a few. So if I filter by article.service, cool. So like I said, these are the default tests at the moment. There's been nothing changed in them, so there'll be some errors. So first thing we need to do is fix those before we carry on. So if I take a look in the spec, if we see what's going on, so basically when you create a test, when a test is generated for you, it creates this testing module, which is basically something that comes with Nest out of the box. So nest.js. If I look in the manual for testing, there's a nest.js testing dependency which gets added in, and then for the unit test, you can see there's some examples here for the cats controller, and it's basically saying, so for the cat service, we use jest to spy on the find all method of that cat service, and then build a mock implementation. So that would then return a result, which would then be this array. And I guess what this is doing is testing that result is then passed straight through to the controller and then returned out. So in theory, that should be enough to prove that test is working. So if we take a look at what we've got here, so we've got this testing module. So this provides a few methods that we can use. So we create the Nest application that returns the Nest application. Article service spec. And then we can use the get command there to resolve this article service, and then just make sure that is defined. So the first thing we need to do is to register our Neo4j service with this class. So if you remember from previous sessions, so we've got this Neo4j module here which registers the Neo4j service with this app module, and then that's run by Nest. So if we look in main.ts, we create a Nest factory based on this app module, and everything gets registered. So inside each of the unit tests, so the idea is we're only testing a small amount of the code. We're only testing individual files. So it wouldn't always make sense to ingest or inject everything into the application or register everything in the application. We only want to really just register one thing. So for this, we just want to register a few things, only the things that would allow us to register this or to test the article service. So if we take a look in the article service itself, so it's got two things injected into it. So it's got the request and it's got the Neo4j service as well. So this is saying that it can resolve, in this case, the Neo4j service. So basically what we need to do is import the Neo4j service in, so just the same way as we've done it with the application as a whole. So I could do this in two ways. So I could register the using the for root async, or I can use the Neo4j module and then for root and either pass through the details. The difference is if I'm using for root async, I'm using a some sort of factory function to find the login details. But essentially, because I don't really want this to log into Neo4j or connect to Neo4j whatsoever, I don't really want to hard code those values in. I could just hard code the values in. It's never going to authenticate against an Neo4j instance, so that should be fine. So I can add the Neo4j module and then for root. Then this expects a config, which is the Neo4j config. So that will want a scheme. So I want Neo4j. I want the address. So I want the host, the local host. I want the port 7687. I want the username to be Neo4j, and then I want the password to be, so just in this case, Neo. And cool. So the next thing to fix is, so this the error is saying its article service is marked as a scope provider. So request and transient scope providers can't be used in combination with the get methods. Please use resolve instead. So basically, the reason for this is because in this article service, I've got it as injectable, but I've got the scope to be request. So basically, the way this works is because I have the scope as request, every time there's a new request coming in, it will create a new instance of the service. So by default, the classes are a singleton, so they're only instantiated once and used throughout the application. But in this case, this is instantiated once per request, and then that means I can inject the request in. So that's that first line there. And basically, what I do is I use that to pull off the user from the request. And then, so I've got the Neo4j service there as well. So basically, instead of using get there, I need to use the resolve method instead. So if we take a quick look at that, so that's returns a promise of t results. So we're going to have to await the value there. And in theory, that should now be defined. Yeah, perfect. So there's something happening there. It's defined. That's good enough. So I guess what we want to do really is we want to test that. For example, the create method. We can create a new group, and then we can say create. And then we want to test some different examples around that service. So if I take a look in the article service again, so the create method, what it does is it accepts a title, a description, a body, and then a tag list, which is a list of strings, and then returns a promise, which then resolves to an article. So this will run a write query against Neo4j, sort of find the user, generate a random UID, create the article node, create the relationship between the user and the article, and then for each of the tags, we'll merge the tag, so either find or create that tag, and then merge the relationship between the article and the tag, and then return some information, and then that information is then hydrated out into this article entity, which is basically just a wrapper just to say that I can call to JSON for this inside the controller, and then everything is has a standardized response. Cool. So basically, to unit test this, I guess the first thing we'll want to do is just to test that if given the correct values that we have passed back through here, then we will get a correct result returned. So basically what I want to do is say, so it should create a new article. Cool. So then we can say that the article that we're going to create would be service.create. And then this will expect some values here. So we've got the title, we've got the description, we've got the body, and then the tag list. So if I create an object for that, cool. So then we can say we want this to be title, data.title. And we want data.description, data.body, and then data.taglist. Cool. So that should run. And so now we've got this this error there of cannot read property user of undefined. So because of the, if we take a look in the article controller, we're basically using an auth guard. So when we post to the post articles endpoint, we use the JWT auth guard. What that does is that adds an instance of the user to the request. And then the article service then basically assumes that there's going to be a user there. So the error is coming here. So this request.user is undefined. So the request there currently is undefined. So that's not being injected through the request. So there may be a better way of doing this. If you know of a better way, anybody watching, then feel free to shout out. But this is the way that I've found to get it to work so far. So basically, what I want to do is I want to create an instance of a user. So we take the user entity, and then we can create a new instance from there. So we've got this this class here, which accepts a Neo4j node, and then we'll return certain information out. So the information that we want on the user is username, email, bio, and image. So what we can do is we can create a new user instance. And then basically, because this expects a node, then we can create like an in-memory instance of a Neo4j node. So in order to import that in, I need to go to the Neo4j driver. So I want to import a node from Neo4j driver. It's in lib and then graph types. So if you take a look at that node, so for some reason the autocomplete isn't working now. So if I find the driver, we can see what's going on. Cool. So if we take a look in graph types, so basically this is a class that returns the different types that you have inside Neo4j. So the native types, we have nodes, we've got relationships there, we've got paths as well. So this node is exported out, so we can take that and create a new instance of it. Cool. So this accepts 3 items or 3 arguments. So it accepts the identity. So that's a Neo4j integer. The labels, which is an array of strings, and then we have the properties, which is an object. So we can say for that. So in order to create a Neo4j integer, then we can take the int function from Neo4j. So we can import that from just Neo4j driver. And let's give this guy a 900 ID there. So based on the information that we would have inside the database, this would just have a user label. And then the properties would be so ID. So the ID is what we want to take inside the service. So we're interested in that get ID there, which then gets the ID. So I will add that in there. So normally that's a UUID, but I can just say test user for now. So if I run that, then I should get a different error this time. Okay, so the imports aren't working there. Cool. Oh yeah, sorry. So we've got the user there, but we've not assigned it to that request yet. So the best way that I've found of doing this so far is because it's a property. I need to do a little bit of trickery there. So for now, I just say object.define property, and then on the service, I want that request because at the moment it's undefined. I just want that to be an object which has a user on there. So that should be a value of user. Cool. So we're saying that for the object of service, we want to define a property with the name of request, and then we basically just want to set the value. So you can set getters and setters on there as well, but we won't worry too much about that. All we care about is that value is going to return a user, which will then be our user entity there. Cool, so that's great. So that's brought us onto the next error. So cannot read property get of undefined. So if we take a look in here, so we've got this. So this Neo4j service. So at the moment this is mock, so there's no information against that. Against that user, sorry, against the class. So what we can do is, because we've got the Neo4j service in here as injected by the Neo4j module, what we can do is we can take that from this test module that we've got going. So the Neo4j service, which will be a Neo4j service. And then we can assign that once the module has been initiated. So before each of the tests, then this new module will be created. So we can say model.get, and then the typeable token, that's going to be the Neo4j service. We'll use the token there, and then that should be an instance there. So we could say, I would just do a couple of tests here. So we could take this, expect the service to be defined, and we also want the Neo4j service to be defined as well. So if there's anything going wrong with that at all, then the whole test is going to fail. So it's something for us to fix. So we should get the same error there at the moment. Yeah, so we've got this cannot read property get of undefined. Cool. So basically, what we do inside here is we run this Neo4j.service.write with these parameters, and then the result comes back. So basically, what we want to do is we want to so this is called spying. So we're spying on a method, and then we are adding some or mocking some return values. So we want to assign user to the request, and then we want to mock the response from Neo4j service. Right. So we can say that the write function is it will be jest.spy on. The object is the Neo4j service, and then the method that we want is write. And then what we want to do is, so for the first time that or for the only time the method is run, we want to define the value that's going to be returned back. So you want to mock resolved value. So we do that once. So if you do mock resolved value, then it'll do it every time. If you do once, then it just does it a single time. Cool. And what we want to do is we want to basically mock the return of the Neo4j driver. So if I take a look at the Neo4j JavaScript driver, basically what we want to do is when we do like a session.run or we do any sort of run, then we get get a result back. So basically on the result, we want a records object that we can then iterate over. So it'd be an array of what are called records. So each of the records, we can use the get function to pull something from that row. So every row that's streamed back from Neo4j result will be acted on inside like a map function. But in the article service itself, we just want like a single one there. We only care about the first row because this query above will only return one row. And then we use that to create an instance of an article. So the mock resolve value, basically this is it's a shorthand for once the query or the mocks function is run, then it will resolve to the value that we it will return a promise that will then resolve back to the value that we're interested in. So basically we want to return a result, which is a part of the Neo4j driver. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do npm install Neo4j driver. Just so I think that will be what gives me the type in. But that result comes from the result. So I can just, for example, for now, import result from Neo4j driver lib result. Cool. So for that, we want records, and that will be an array. And then so each of the records we want to basically return a result. So if we look in the source, and then result. So the way this works is we've got like a keys function on there. We've got the summary, and then we've got the promise. Cool. So if I take a look back in that again, and we take a look at the result. So we have this result, so which extends a promise of query result. So we've got promise. So what will resolve will be this query result. So we want records, which is an array of records, and then a summary. But I think we can ignore that. A record should have a keys, which would be the array of keys that are available for that, and a length. And so the only important thing we have at the moment is this get method. So it's complaining now that there's no get method, so there's nothing nothing resolved which allows us to run get on there. So what I can do is, so this will return an array of objects. So for example, we'd have keys. So if we want to mock it exactly as to how it would come back, we'd have A, we'd have article count. No, we wouldn't. We would have a tag list favorited and favorites count. So we'd have a tag list favorited and favorites count. Cool. And then, so we need a to mock this get function. So for example, if we take a key, which is basically what the function does at the moment, we want to return a result. So it takes the key, so for example, A. So if we're looking for row.getA, then we want a node back. For tag list, we want a list of nodes or an array of nodes, which will then be added to the tag. And then we've got the favorite count and the favorited. So what we can do is we can, so if we, for example, we just return null, then we should now see, if we run the test again, so now we've got this kind of read property map of null. So it's trying to do a map on this tag list. So because I'm returning null, then that's okay for get, but it falls down at this point because it's expecting an array. So what I can do is do like a switch statement on the key. So if the key is tag list, then I can return an array. So for example, like 1, 2. But so really, this is expecting an array of nodes. So I can do the same thing again. So where I've created this this node above, I can do the same thing. So I can return. So we'll give this 100, and we'll call this tag with the name of tag 1 and tag 2. So actually, what we could do is we could take the value from here, and then we could say instead of that, so we could say data.taglist.map, and then convert that into a value. So new node, and then we'll do 100, and then we can take the index. So that'd be 100 for the first one, 101 for the second. It's going to be tags, and then we want the properties to just take the name in there basically. Cool. So if we do the same thing for the other two as well while we're here. So if we row.getA, so if the case is A, then we want to return a new node. I'll give that an ID of, let's say, 1 for now. It's going to be an article node, and then for the properties, we can just use the data. Cool. So if I just log out what we're getting returned at the moment. So you can see that, so the article, so that's the A that we've given, so it's the ID of 1. It's got the labels of article, and then it's got the title description of the body. So this tag list shouldn't really be there, but I mean, it doesn't matter for now, for testing purposes, it's okay. We've got the author, which is the user node that we added to the request. And the tag list is an array of tags, so that's that tag entity. So again, like the user, this takes a node in, and then that's just returning the name to mock the response there. Cool. So the two things we've got missing are the favorite count. Return, say 3 for that. And then favorited is a Boolean, so we'll just return false. Cool. So if we run that again, we should see those values over there. So the favorites count. So let's just set that to be 100. Cool, so that's working. But basically, what this does is basically the controller relies on using this to method JSON, to JSON method. Sorry. So by doing this, we should now get some errors in there because we did something wrong. Okay, it's good. Cool. So then we can just do like an assert on that one, so we can check the values. So basically, for that JSON, we expect it to equal. So basically, we want to take the data, we use the spread operator to test it. Everything that's set inside the inside this data object is then set onto the node itself and is returned back properly. So we want the author as well. So that should be the user entity that we've got, and that should be converted to JSON. And then we want the tag list. So if I double check that. So it's tag list.map. So basically, it should just equal that actually, so that should be fine. Cool, and then we want to test a few things in there. So we want to test that an ID is assigned property and properly and returned properly. So we can say, for example, the ID is test article 1. So we want to test that is in there as well. So the ID is correctly returned. And then we want to test that favorited is 100, which is what we've added there. And then we want to, so it should be false. And then favorites count should be 100. Cool, so that's good. Everything is fine. And everything is passing there fine. Cool. So to recap, basically what we've done is got this test working. So we've added in the Neo4j module, so the test module is aware of what it means to have a Neo4j service injected in. And then for that Neo4j service, we are mocking in. So in this method, mocking the write method. So Neo4j service.write. And then if that is called, then we return this response back. So we return our own result with certain values in there. We then call the service, which then gives us our info. And then we test it for the JSON response that's returned out. So of the flow that goes from the Neo4j driver to the application, and then through to the return of the service in this article entity. We expect that everything should be as we've entered it in, with some extra details on there, which are returned by the Neo4j driver. Cool. So that's it. And that's kind of all we need to do. So I guess my next job now is to add these into some sort of test utils that we can put into Nest Neo4j to make things easier, and just to provide some test utils that make things easier in general for people to test. So I appreciate this is a bit of a nightmare to write these sorts of things. But great. I mean, if anyone has got any questions, any comments, feel free to get in touch with me. I'm Adam Cowley on Twitter. You can create an issue in any of the repositories. If there's anything you'd like to see, feel free to reach out. Get in touch and let me know what you'd like to see, and then we can build it from there in a future session. But otherwise, thanks a lot for your time. It's much appreciated, and I'll see you next week for the next session.